Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we get you ready for the Detroit Lions Week 3 matchup in the desert versus the Arizona Cardinals. We discuss takeaways from film breakdown, share what we expect from each team, as well as how the Lions might match up. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Detroit Lions 2023 Fan of the Year, Robert Gonzalez, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on the Get Around podcast. That drops on Mondays.
Thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to having a better weekend this weekend than last weekend.
I sure hope that is the case, James. I second that emotion. Probably a third on that emotion is Coach Jerry Angers, former Michigan High School Coach of the Year, as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions, and current scouting director and training director of Bull Rush Sports.
Great to be here, and I'm glad that Sunday's over with and we're moving on to the next opponent.
Yeah, we need to move on because, you know what, though? As frustrated as many people might be, aren't there like 4 teams in the NFL that's 2-0 right now? And we already talked about it in the recap. The sky is not falling, and some of the information we share in this episode might actually encourage people about what we've seen so far from this Lions team. Before we get to the Lions, let's look at how different Arizona is from last year, or so far this year. First off, we all know about that top draft pick, Marvin Harrison Jr., and week 2 was very different than week 1. He was quite productive, and a lot of people think he's an instant threat. Making that possible is the return of Kyler Murray, who missed much of last season due to an injury. He is back. He is healthy. Arizona also added Darius Robinson, a defensive lineman, out of Missouri late in the first round. A defensive back in the second round, Max Melton from Rutgers. So they've got some defensive help, along with signing a couple in free agency. James, what are you seeing so far out of some of these additions in the offseason?
Well, they kind of changed their defensive line look a little bit. They signed Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones in free agency. They gave them both kind of decent contracts at 3 years for each. And I think a combined $51 million between them, to give them a couple of big defensive linemen at 313 and 309. The way they've been using their defense so far this season is those defensive linemen aren't putting up tackles or really anything. They're there to keep the linebackers and the safeties clean and let them make the plays. And you saw what they did last week against the Rams, where they had that one linebacker who just kept going crazy all game because they couldn't get anybody on him. They added Sean Murphy Bunting at corner as well, to drafting some guys. And I think we talked a little bit on the pod last year about how Arizona had said that they were going to copy Detroit on as far as their blueprint as how to do the turnaround. And they've kind of done that. They've varied a little bit in signing free agents to bigger and longer contracts, which we know that Brad Holmes has been very reluctant to do. But aside from that, I think they've kind of been going about it the same way, trying to get football players rather than just talented guys. They changed their wide receiver room a lot, trading Rondale Moore for Desmond Ridder, letting Hollywood Brown walk. And then they re-signed Greg Dortch, who's actually been a pretty good slot receiver for them this year.
Yeah, a lot of changes in the offseason and only 2 weeks of tape this year, 2 weeks of film to kind of know what the team is. And every team at this point is so young in the season. But Coach Campbell, he weighed in on what he expects from Arizona, and no shock, he's expecting a quality opponent this week.
So they're dangerous over there. They've scored first 3 possessions, first 3 drives in the last 2 games. And then defensively, man, they give you multiple looks. They fly to the football. They're aggressive. This, Buddha is, he is, he's an issue. He's an active player. He is a football playing dude, man, and he can smell it. He can sniff it out, and he's going to find it. They're physical up front, and they play good. They play well together. They play hard. So this is going to be an outstanding test for us, and they're playing good football right now.
So, Coach, I mean, he talked about the offense, but he finished talking about the defense, and there's a safety that the Lions have to keep their eye on, Budda Baker. Talk about him, Coach.
He's a dog. The guy, watching film, he's all over the place. They'll blitz him. They'll bring him down in covers. They get him down in the box to work on the defense, to run stop. He's shining. Every time you see a big play, it seems like his number 3 is popping in the film on that. He's one of those guys that you don't know where he's coming from. He'll come from the wide angle on the blitzing concepts. And so they're just he's just one of those guys you got to look at, and their fronts. James had talked about that a little bit. I got some film, and I'll show I'll put it up on Twitter. With the one down lineman and them running blitz concepts, and they're 3rd and 5. They got one down lineman, and everybody's standing up. So they're trying to get you to make mistakes. They're trying to get you to overthink instead of going right at them. So I think that's one of the things, and they disguise their coverages pretty well, which we had problem with last week and the week before. So I think this is a huge test for us.
Yeah, and Budda's going to be a big part of that. And that's what Campbell finished talking about. But he started talking about that offense. I mean, that's pretty impressive to score that much. And, they lost to Buffalo in a 1-score affair, and then they went and destroyed the Rams. And so after 2 weeks, and again, 2 weeks is not a big track record, but Arizona's offense is 7th overall in yards, 4th in rushing, and 15th in passing. And Kyler Murray's running is going to help that rush stat, right? But the big thing is they are 2nd in points scored. So offensive takeaways. James, what are you seeing out of this offense?
Well, yeah, they scored a ton of points. They were also very, very efficient. Marvin Harrison did what he did on only 4 catches. And James Conner is very sneaky effective and one of those kind of under the radar running backs. And last week, 21 carries, 122 yards, 5.8 a carry. I mean, think of somebody who's running like David Montgomery was in overtime pretty much throughout the game last week. So he's been really good. Behind him, though, they drafted Trey Benson to have a 1-2 combo at running back, and Benson has been very uninspiring so far through 2 games, but still has a lot of potential, I think. I think that this was kind of supposed to be a rebuild year for them, and I think they're kind of ahead of the schedule, kind of like the season for Detroit 2 years ago when they just missed out on the playoffs. So I think they're very, very similar.
Yeah, James Conner is one of those guys. People remember him from that time when he filled in Pittsburgh and him coming there. And he's one of those guys that plays above his reputation, I think. I think you're exactly right. He's sneaky good. And so, Coach, you've had a time to look at some film and whatnot. Well, what are you seeing out about this offense for Arizona?
Well, he's, definitely Conner. I'm going to talk about him. He's one of those guys. He's underappreciated, and he's going to make sure everybody knows that he's going to be appreciated after every game. So, I totally agree with that. You look at Murray's game last week, perfect passer rating. The guy threw for 266 yards and rushed for 59. He made some plays, and again, I got some plays that him using his feet, making you miss. We better put him in a vice. We better surround him. We better stay in our passing lanes, because that guy, when he gets out in the open and their scramble rules, their wide receiver scramble rules, they know where to be. Harrison catches one big touchdown on one, or a big pass on one of them. The tight end catches a touchdown pass on one of the scrambles. And, that he's a small guy, and we got to get in his face. And if we got to keep him in there to lock that down. I think Harrison broke out last week. They were kind of doubting him after week 1. But again, a couple of those big plays were on scrambles. And it wasn't that he did it. Another one was a great design play where he ran all the way across formation on a naked boot. And Murray had, basically he was the lone receiver and adjusted his route. He adjusted his route to get open. So it was just good stuff.
Yeah, Coach, I took a look at some of that film you broke down, and you are exactly right. Murray extended those plays, and it was those broken plays or extended plays where he did some of his biggest damage that you were showing us on that film breakdown.
Yeah. And it is. And those are things, that you got to keep. Baker Mayfield hurt us last week with some running and some tough plays, and those are things that we have to do. We've always had a kind of a tough time with a running quarterback, a guy that can get out on the edge and take off and stuff like that. I think we're better than that. I think we're prepared for it this year. So, hey, I got a quick tidbit here. Name the, Harrison had 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, right? Can you name the last guy that did that in the NFL?
To have 2 touchdowns in the first quarter of a game?
Yep, as a rookie, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, as a rookie.
Yeah.
I say Calvin Johnson, but I don't remember who was throwing in the ball. It might have been John Kitna.
No, Marvin Harrison Sr.
His dad.
His dad. How crazy is that?
Like father, like son. And if he's anything to have a career like his dad, that would be quite complimentary.
Long as it doesn't start this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. So this offense is going to be a test. I mean, 2nd in points scored, 7th in yards overall. So let's jump over to the Arizona defense a minute. Their defense is 13th in yards allowed, 9th in rush, 19th in pass defense. They've been giving up about 22 points per game, and that's ranked 16th in points allowed. We kind of briefly touched on the defense, but James, can you go a little bit more on what you're seeing out of this defense? They played Buffalo, a very potentially decently good offensive team. Great quarterback, great running back, receiving core is a work in progress there. And then the Rams, we saw them against the Lions in week 1, and they held them to like 10 points and kind of suffocated them. What did you see out of the Arizona defense so far?
Well, one guy the Lions are going to have to contain other than Bubba is Dennis Gardick. He was one of those linebackers that the defensive line was able to make it so that he could roam and do whatever he want. He had 3 sacks, 4 tackles for losses, 3 quarterback hits, and a forced fumble against the Rams, going against the same line that Aiden Hutchinson did. So I mean, that was just pretty darn impressive. The Cardinals had 5 sacks as a team last week. The same as the Lions when Aiden Hutchinson had his giant game. Their defense has been pretty solid. I mean, but I think that the Lions is too, or has been too for the first games. I think that it's interesting that the over-under on this game in Vegas is 51.5. I don't think it's going to that. I think this is going to be more of a defensive game than people think, and it's going to be less of a shootout, even though the Lions offense hasn't put points on the board, but is 2nd in the league in yardage.
Oh, yeah. The Lions offense, when we get to them, I was surprised to see where they ranked in overall yardage. But you're going with a defensive game here, lower scoring than people are expecting, based on what you've seen so far, James?
I think so. I just think that the number in Vegas is a little high for this game, and as well as both defenses have played in their first 2 games. I just 51.5 points is a lot. You're talking about both teams scoring 4 touchdowns about. Or just
all right.
Under.
Well, seeing some of those defensive alignments, Coach, on the film that you were sharing with us surprised me. They had a lot of guys standing up on the line of scrimmage. Why? I don't think most Lions fans are used to seeing something like that. What's the idea behind it? And I guess kind of just summarize it for those who haven't had a chance to see your film.
Well, it's a dime package, whatever. They, with 1 down lineman in that situation, standing everybody up. Offensive linemen like to know exactly who they're hitting. And when they're showing a 5 front with a guy standing up over the center, a nose, he's dropping into pass coverage. They're running double loop with their 2 tackles in that situation, and both the DNs are crashing down. You'll see that on some of the film stuff like that. It puts you into a situation on. It's much easier to block the guy in front of you, or the guy shaded to your left or shaded to your right, than to block a blitzing linebacker or a looping D lineman. We've had trouble with that in a couple situations this year. Our first game we missed a looping tackle end game, what you call it. I don't care what, I call it loop, you can call it whatever you want. And so those situations is, once there's somebody there, then all of a sudden they're gone. And it puts a lot of pressure, especially on your guard concept. To go off of, hey, I was supposed to double here. Hey, I called for help here. Hey, this guy's gone. So, and then again, it disguises the coverages, especially they call them zone blitzes. So you got, 4 guys coming, but 2 or 3 guys are dropping off the line of scrimmage. Goff has to figure out which guys are dropping off the line of scrimmage and where they're dropping at. So, and you get some free runners. You look in that Rams game. I think Baker had a free run shot. I think one of the other corners had a free run shot. And you look at last week, how many times did we get run down from the backside in our run game? Because that corner or that nickel safety, whatever, comes off the edge, screaming 100 miles an hour because nobody accounts for him. So that's what this defensive front does. You can't account for everybody. You can account for them in front of you. You can't account for where they're going to be or end up.
Have you ever tried to explain football to a kid? It's near impossible to make it make sense. I know my girls didn't get it at first. Well, meet Future Fans, an innovative brand that helps little kids become big fans by embedding the rules of football into parallel games and activities. My daughters and I read through the book and we played each of the games. Their excitement grew as we progressed, and at the end, you could see the connection between the activities and how they correlated to understanding football. It's a well put together product. Folks, in addition to running Not the Same Old Lions podcast, I'm also a teacher. I know a thing or two about learning. Future Fans specifically designed their product to engage and educate kids about the game of football. My daughters aren't just fans of watching football either. They're now playing flag football too. And they're big Lions fans. If you want your kid to understand football, Future Fans is for you. It's only $49.99. Use the code LIONS at futurefans.com to get 10% off and unlock a lifetime of memories with a kid in your life starting now.
Get 15% off a set of Brake Best Select, Select Pro, or Import Direct brake pads and 2 rotors now at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Yeah, I mean, based on all this information, we know we have a formidable opponent. And in the NFL, if you don't take any opponent as formidable, you're likely to be unpleasantly surprised. And so let's turn and see what we expect out of the Lions and then how we think the Lions are going to match up. And again, I know some fans are disappointed the Lions are 1-1 right now. I mean, everybody is, because you want to go undefeated, but the odds of that are so slim. I think I mentioned there were 4 undefeated teams in the NFL. I meant the NFC. All right, there's 4 in the NFC that are somewhat improbable when you put the Minnesota Vikings in there. People didn't expect that. And then you've got the Saints, the Bucks, and Seattle, right? And I believe there's 5 in the AFC. So that being said, James already dropped part of this. When I went to look up stats, the Lions offense is number 2 in the NFL in yards gained. Now, Coach, I don't know if you would have guessed that. Maybe you would have, because you've done so much film study. 9th in rushing, and they're number 2 in the league in passing. So that tells you that Coach Campbell's not just spitting stuff out. I think he's legit when he says we're really close to being in a really good spot. Obviously, they are not as good in points scored. They rank only 16th in points scored, and that's been the difference in them being 2-0 versus 1-1. And it looks like, on the offensive side, they've had a number of interior pressures this last game. And so that affected Goff a little bit. But also, when the pocket has been clean, he wasn't quite as sharp as he has been. So, James, right now, what are you seeing out of the Detroit Lions offense so far this year over 2 games?
Well, it's interesting that basically, if you look at the players who had the lowest PFF grades for the Lions last week, they were all on offense. It was Glasgow. It was both of your top 2 tight ends, Goff and Khalif Raymond was in there for some reason, is not having a very good game. And So if you have a couple of your linemen in there, they allowed 16 or 19 pressures, I think it was. Glasgow gave up 6, and Ragnow gave up 5, which is, I think, almost as many as he gave up in entire seasons before. So they gotta put that together. I think Zeitler played pretty well, but I think Glasgow at left guard is maybe that's not his best position. But Zeitler is only a right guard, so they don't really have much of an option there with playing Glasgow on the left side. So I still think that the offensive line is the strength of that team. The run blocking is incredible, and I think that they need to run the ball more. They need to run more play action. They haven't done that much this first 2 games. They haven't run a lot of play action passes. And Goff really excelled in that last season, and they haven't done it much this year.
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't do more play action. I agree with you completely on that, James. And we wondered, why didn't they run the ball more last week at times? And Campbell mentioned in his post game or the day after that they thought they were so close and they had a big play or they gained 7 or 8. But then after they got the first down, if it was a 3rd and long, they would run and they would lose like 2 or 3 yards on a run. And he mentioned maybe like a safety coming up or timing it just right. Coach, what were you seeing on some of that where, they were able to get us for a loss on that first play to put us into a 2nd and long versus a 2nd in, medium range?
Well, staying on schedule, and I'm glad you brought that up because I just mentioned a little bit ago about the corners and stuff coming off the edge and catching Gibbs from behind, and they're just pressing. And those big things is you got a 1st and 10, and then you lose 2 yards. Now you're at 2nd and 12. Oh my God, we got to throw the ball. The Lions, could, and especially, and then the other thing that happens with that is what the disguise of the coverages. And once they disguise those coverages, Goff was having a tough time finding, hey, the play is designed like this. I mean, they basically had every one of our receivers bracketed. I mean, I went through and watched every one of the pass plays again, and the concept was awesome. And so those are the biggest things. Let's talk about the one play where they kicked the field goal. So they had a 2nd and 10. From the 10, we ran the ball on 2nd down, got 7 yards, and it was 3rd and 3, and we tried to throw the ball. And we kicked the field goal, and I brought that out about a couple different disguises on coverages that, some of the film that I looked at, they bring a safety down in the box. So we try to, we try to throw the ball. They take the safety out of the box. We run the ball. If we can maybe we're not getting any checks at the line of scrimmage. Maybe they're not into that situation yet because coach did say that the offense is a little bit behind. So.
All right, well, Coach, those are some great observations. Can we go a little bit more into a couple things James brought up? The number of pressures that the defense got on Goff, did that surprise you? And then are you surprised that the Lions didn't do more play action?
Yeah, I think you have to slow those blitzers up. You have to bring those linebackers in the box. You can't let them free drop, that's especially in the passing game. You got to get those guys to come down. The pressure concept, one play I'm thinking about with Rags, Veda basically ran him over. He started on his inside. It would have been on Rags's right shoulder. Glasgow's on the left side, completely uncovered. So he looks, he reads, he sees that he's on the inside shoulder. Well, he crosses Rag's face, and Glasgow doesn't help pick up. Glasgow's kind of no man's land, blocking air. And those are communication things that are going to change, as he gets more comfortable. Like James said, with him playing on the left side, he's probably, and I know what he looked. He looked at it and he goes, Rags has got him, but that's bad. That dude's he's a man child, and that was a pressure. If we don't have that pressure right there, Golf goes through his progression, his reads, and we got to check down to about the 8 or 9 yard line, and who knows what happens with that. So, and again, those loop blitzes, when they run games on the line and they come around, Glasgow's given up one or probably 2 this year that I can remember, and other guys too. I don't want to just pick on Glasgow right now, but so I think that's what we're talking about right there. That's the stuff that, and for some reason, they don't feel a threat. But every one of those pass routes last week, they had an under coverage and over coverage, no matter where our pass routes were, and they rallied. And one other thing, normally we can throw that 3rd and 5 yard or 3rd and 7 yard pass, 3rd and 6 yard pass short in the middle, but when it's 3rd and 7 or 8, it's a lot harder to complete that pass when you got all those guys in the middle field collapsing on St. Brown and those guys. So hopefully that stuff's going to change and we get ahead of schedule. We got to get ahead of schedule on sticks.
Yeah, and again, those adjustments on the offensive line, it was a little bit more complex than just substituting Jonah Jackson out and putting Kevin Zeitler in, because you move Glasgow to the other side, and then he's got to do the other side of the line, and then also he's on the other side of Ragnow, and then he's got Decker next to him, and there's probably small, minute things that body language he was used to on the other side of the line from playing a different position and with a different player. So is there hope that, they'll continue to improve as the season goes on? Just because in some ways you could say it's like the secondary. There is some new parts in here working together.
Film don't lie. Right, James? Film don't lie.
Yeah.
And those film sessions are huge. Something they have never seen before. Now they see it on film.
Yeah, and then I think it's also a difference for Glasgow as far as now he's playing next to Taylor Decker, who's as we know, is a very good left tackle. But on the other side, he was next to the best tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, that's a good point. Before we get off the Lions offense, one thing I had read is that Tampa ran a really good zone in the red zone against the Lions. Coach, were you able to see any of that and maybe have ideas of why the Lions struggled against that zone? Was it because of a lack of play action and they didn't have a good enough run game going consistently, or what were your observations?
Well, they by their zone, they do a match zone out of it too. So in other words, when a guy comes into the zone, somebody jumps him, if they're going to try to go over top. When you're talking red zone and you're taking 10 yards in, you're only talking 30 yards of field to 20 yards of field and inside, you know what I'm saying, with the end zone. So the disguise, for instance, that double, I think I sent you guys the video, and we ran the exact same thing where we brought Laporta in. Okay, we brought Laporta in. He was split out wide to the right. We brought him in. The safety backed off, thinking it was a pass. We hit him with a run. Okay, so the safety was out of the box. The next time we did the exact same formation structure. The next time we brought him in, the safety stayed down in the box. As soon as Laporta decided to block, as soon as he put his hands up to block, the safety busted. We used to call it hot route. The safety busted the sidelines as fast as he could, which undercut JMO on the speed out with the coverage over top and a coverage underneath. Does that make sense, you guys? And I mean, they got it. Now, if we delay the block, which we did to Laporta on the first down play, later, I can't remember, later in the game, where Laporta kind of went down 1-2 block and then released, and we hit him for first down. If we do that in that situation, it's a touchdown. Does that make so? That's coming, guys. I guarantee that's coming. And Laporta's hopefully 100% healthy. We keep forgetting about he missed basically all the camp with the hamstring. So I think we've been hiding him a little bit in the blocking game. But I think I'm feeling he's going to get let loose.
James, are you expecting? I know you said you think this is not going to maybe hit that 51-point thing that Vegas has for the number of points in this one. But what are you expecting out of the Lions' offense in this one? Do you think they're going to, figure some things out? Maybe get into a little bit more of a rhythm or a groove compared to what they did against Tampa?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the things that Tampa did was they took away the middle, which is Jared Goff's strength, is throwing over the middle. Rather than throwing to the very perimeter of the field. So Tampa was just like, well, we're just going to concentrate on taking that away. And they did pretty well. I mean, it didn't, and the fact that they kept Laporta in the block more because of his health, I think played a factor in that they use him more as a blocker than a receiver. That helped that. It went right into it. Because you weren't seeing Amon-Ra St. Brown wide open on those inside dig routes and all those that you normally see, even though he had a pretty big game. statistically, you just weren't seeing those crossing routes open in the middle like they normally were. So I think play action helps that. If they pound the ball early, which I think they can against this defense, then I think that'll definitely open that up a little bit.
Yeah, because you're right. St. Brown has some great numbers, but man, he had to work for those numbers. And he got beat up because he wasn't open. And so that play action can bring those linebackers up a little bit to create a little bit more space for him to try and catch those crossing routes across the middle. So, Coach, any other thoughts on what the Lions offense might do? You know, do you think we might see Laporta more in the passing game? Because Campbell was asked about that injury, James, and he said, well, that was definitely a week one thing, but he's healthy. And so could this be a situation where, like St. Brown last week, and this is going to go to my prediction later, a little little preview here, does Laporta get a little bit more involved in the passing game this week?
I think they will. And I think one of the things off of that is, I haven't looked at it or did a percentage of 2-by-2 formations. In other words, 2 receivers on each side. And what's our pass concept in that? How many times have we completed passes in that? Or how many times have we completed passes whereby run a 3-by-1? And we go into that empty set while we're going max coverage because there's no threat of run. So I'm thinking there's going to be some more 3-man floods into a zone and let Goff make his reads off of that. I just think with the 2-by-2, you can set your defense because the offense is balanced. And when we're running motions and stuff like that, get a motion out of a 2-by-2 to get to a 3 receiver to one side to one, or flare the back out. So I'm thinking we're going to see a little bit more of that. Again, I don't know the numbers. I wish I had went through and did that, but I just think there's some things there that we're putting a lot of pressure on Goff to make these reads when these defenses are going, oh, he loves that middle route. He loves throwing over the middle, and maybe get some layers where we're going 3 levels over the middle. There's a couple times if we have 3 layers over the middle, there's a touchdown because you can only cover 2 of those guys with doing 3 guys. So,
well, I agree with you on that empty set, right? No tailbacks in there. We have 2 talented running backs to go without a running back there, because you're telling the defense, I mean, it's not like it's Lamar Jackson back there with that running threat. Or in this game, Kyler Murray, right? Jared Goff, yeah. James, 2 weeks in a row, he hit the over on the rush, right? Because isn't his over under like a half yard? And so 2 weeks in a row, he did do that. But when you've got the running backs like that, even if it's just one, even if it's, you know what? He's going to go out for a short pass or something. It keeps the threat of a run in there. So the safety and the linebackers have to at least think briefly before just reacting. Now, James, one thing a lot of people have been saying about the offense for the Lions that is a struggle or a reason for it is the lack of Josh Reynolds. Now, Tim Patrick played this past week. We thought he did some good things in his first, appearance for the Lions. But is the Josh Reynolds things being overblown, or is it just, does it seem like it's maybe multiple pieces that have created the final result versus just one thing?
I think it's multiple things. People are saying that they didn't address the position when they let Josh Reynolds go, but I think that part of the addressing that position was the development of Jameson Williams, and what they hoped was the development of Antoine Green as well, who got hurt in preseason and is probably out for the season. So I think they thought between those two, and then having Khalif Raymond, and they hoped that DPJ would take another step as well, and he didn't. So I think that they thought that they were going to basically crowdsource all that Josh Reynolds production with those guys getting better. And Jameson Williams has been better, obviously, but Antoine Green's injury, Khalif Raymond didn't play very well last week. Donovan Peoples-Jones is on the practice squad. So, I think that, Tim Reynolds actually looked pretty solid last week, I thought. All the things that went to him, he caught everything. He had the one where his foot was just an inch out of bounds. Otherwise, he was going to be 3 for 3 on all his targets. He blocked pretty well. And they didn't ease him into this game. I mean, he played 33 snaps, which is pretty good for a guy who's only been with your team for 2 weeks and is supposedly injury prone. They threw him right into the fire.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of the same way. Do I wish we had Josh Reynolds? Yes. Do I think he is the reason our offense has struggled? No. I think we've kind of talked about it. There's been multiple components, multiple things that have been done that have affected the offense. And the good news is they can still be worked out. And we're number 2 in the NFL in yards gained with all these issues. So a lot of hope there. Let's turn over to the defense for the Lions. They are 14th in yards allowed, 4th in rush defense, which didn't surprise me. They're actually 21st in pass defense. That surprised me a little bit because I thought they were better than that, but I know Stafford, I think he did throw for 300 yards in that first game. They have allowed an average of 20 points a game, and that's pretty easy to do the math when you allow the same points 2 games in a row, which is 12th in points allowed. So how's the defense looking to you, James? What are your overall observations right now from the Lions?
I mean, overall, I'm pretty happy with the defense so far. It'll remain to be seen whether Anzalone passes his concussion tests and can be in there. And if he's not, then you're going to see a lot more. I think Jalen Reeves-Maybin, you're going to see a lot more Rodrigo in there if they're going to stick with the base defense rather than the nickel look that they used a lot last year. But the first 2 weeks, it's been pretty good, especially considering, that you had a monkey wrench thrown into things in the pregame last week with Rakestraw hurting his hamstring, and he didn't practice today either this week, so we'll see what that is. But I think Terrion Arnold has been pretty solid for a rookie, all things considered. He's had a couple of penalties, but they haven't been the worst kind of penalties or anything. Carlton Davis has been what he was advertised as, which is a number 1 corner who you can just stick on another team's number 1 guy, and that guy's not going to have his normal game. So overall, I've been pretty happy. I mean, the Lions, as far as PFF, their defense is ranked 5th. Their rush defense is ranked 3rd in the NFL. They're ranked 1st in the NFL in tackling. They're ranked 1st in the NFL in pass rush, and only 19th in coverage.
Yeah, those are some great numbers, and like you, I'm happy with this defense, what we've seen. And we also have talked about before the season even started that we expect the defense to get better as the season goes on, especially with the secondary being new and playing together. And even as new as it is, and even with those penalties, I completely agree. I look at Terrion Arnold and I'm like, I'm glad we drafted this guy. I see a star in the making. And DJ Reader just started playing last week. So there is a lot of room for improvement here. You did touch on that injury to Alex Anzalone. And before we get out of here, we will hit on all the injuries on the Lions are dealing with right now. And as a lot of teams across the league are dealing with injuries. But one of the other things we talked about a lot last year is the Lions played a ton of nickel defense last year and the year before. We wondered if that was out of design or out of necessity based on what the personnel they had. Coach, we've seen a huge improvement from this linebacking core from the Lions, and they played a lot more base defense. So I guess, from your film analysis, and another idea here is, what have you seen from the Lions defense? And do you think, A, possibly with the fact that Anzalone could be out, and B, with the threat that Kyler Murray offers up in the scrambling ability, would they maybe put another defensive back out there versus an extra linebacker?
I mean, that's a good question because Murray's scary. And I think the thing is with the linebacker concept, especially if you keep Murray and you keep 3 linebackers in there with the defensive linemen, they're going to be able to corral him. You're going to have to vice tackle him. Nobody's going to get the big hit on him. He's too short to come up high on things like that. You're going to have to keep him within the pocket. And I think that's one of the biggest things that they're going to have to do. They're going to have to be able to get the pressure, keep him in that pocket, make him throw from the pocket because he is short, and then let the big D tackles do some work up front. So I think that's a big thing that we're going to see from there. Are you going to spy them? Probably not. I mean, we're pretty quick up front. I think we got our other defensive end back. to help push. I think Reeder and those guys are gonna try to collapse that pocket and let Hutch and Davenport stuff come from the outside. And then if we do break down, the biggest thing where he gets out of the pocket is our corners and safeties have to realize their scramble rules, which I'm sure they're studying them and realizing Harrison takes off downfield, the tight end comes across the field the way he's rolling or the way he scrambles to, and just keep him down. We're going to break it. I don't think we'll go extra on that. I don't think we need to. I think we've gotten into a good situation where our corners and stuff. I think we had a blown coverage last week from a rookie. I mean, that's part of it. But again, film don't lie. He's going to learn from that and he's going to get better. And hopefully they're done calling pass interference calls on.
Yeah, that would be nice to see those come to a little bit of an end right there. James, I want to go back to Carlton Davis. You brought up how big of an addition he was, and he was probably more valuable of an asset acquired this offseason than a lot of Lions fans realize. Because, like you said, he's as advertised, a number one defensive back with experience. And so that takes a little bit of pressure off the defense. Coach and I, we talked a little bit about the scrambling quarterback. We talked about Kyler Murray's abilities, and we say it's always been our Achilles. But let's be honest here, a couple things. One, scrambling quarterbacks are difficult for any defense in the league. And two, we've watched the evolution of the Lions defense over 3 to 4 years now. When we first saw it, the Lions had a lot less talent on defense, so the scrambling was that much more of an issue. Do you think the defense is starting to rise up to a better level, that it's always going to be an issue for any defense if any quarterback can scramble, but do you think it's not as big of a liability as it has been in the past?
Yeah, it has been something over the last couple of years that running quarterbacks have just seemed to really kind of gash the Detroit Lions. But I think the point you raised about the better talent on the defense is another thing. But people are like, why isn't James Houston playing? And I think that's part of it, because there's better talent around him. 2 years ago, when he had that breakout season, they needed to play him because they didn't have as much talent on defense. Now he's a luxury. He only played 3 snaps last week. Interesting though, on one of them, if maybe the Lions don't value James Houston as nearly as much anymore, the Buccaneers certainly did, because on one of the 3rd and longs that they put him in to rush the passer, they double teamed him right away.
Nice.
So the teams around the league know what you're bringing him in for. So, but it's also interesting that on the flip side of that, Kyler Murray, he had the perfect passer rating. He was 17 to 21. All 4 of those incompletions were on targets to Marvin Harrison. He targeted Marvin Harrison 8 times, but he only completed 4 of them. He was perfect on everybody else. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, Marvin Harrison's going to be the guy that's probably going to have Carlton Davis on him. I would assume that's going to be the game plan. And your other knock on Kyler Murray is that he still has a really long baseball-like windup when he throws the ball, other than really short passes and stuff like that. With Hutchinson getting pressures, that's begging for a fumble. So you hope that you see that this week out of the Lions defense.
All right, well, let's get into where we sit with personnel, because there have been some injuries. The first practice report of the week, the encouraging news is Marcus Davenport and Amon-Ra St. Brown were full participants in practice, because obviously Davenport was out and St. Brown was beat up pretty bad at the end of the game there, and we all worried about what that could mean. So those guys were full participants. Kirby Joseph and Isaiah Williams are both limited. And then the guys that did not practice, Alex Anzalone, not a surprise. Terrion Arnold was out. That was due to an illness. Graham Glasgow was a surprise one for not practicing. It was listed as a knee thing. You still had Enos Rakestraw, hamstring still, which got him out the game before. He didn't practice. And then Ifatu Melifonwu with an ankle. So, again, those statuses can change throughout the week. We won't know exactly, who's going to be where until probably Friday or Saturday. So let's look at what's it going to take for the Lions to win this game. Before we do that, Coach, you want to weigh in on some of these injuries?
Yeah, St. Brown was all cramps. I watched this podcast today, and they were asking him about it. And his brother was calling him out and saying they don't run tough enough practices to be ready for it. But he said that the one when he fell down and then they had to burn a timeout anyways, and they told him to get off the field. Sewell came up to him at that point and said, "Dude, thanks for staying down. I am exhausted." So they, for some reason, they said it was extremely hot in Ford Field, and they were that drive. It was kind of a long drive on an 8, 9, 10 play drive. But so anyways, I just want to touch base on that. I was really happy when St. Brown was going, "Dude, I'm fine," and his brother was calling him out saying he wasn't tough enough. So, but he said it was all cramping. Both calves, he said, were he was cramped up. So.
Wow, yeah, and that's the thing. Campbell has said soft tissue stuff, and so extremely encouraging that's all it was.
Yeah, which is not surprising considering they were playing at home at Ford Field, it is pretty warm on the playing surface. Jerry's played there a couple times; he can attest to that. But the Lions also ran 85 plays on offense. That is a lot for an NFL team. The disparity in plays in that Bucks game, you would not think that they lost that game with the Lions running 85 plays and the Bucks only running 48. So I think that's part of the reason why St. Brown was cramping. He was out there for almost all of those. It's also they get back. In theory, Isaiah Williams was a limited in practice today, and so that's a good sign that he may be able to go this weekend too, which maybe gives them that other wide receiver.
Yeah, they would likely probably have him and bring up Tim Patrick again and then not use their third elevation on Tom Kennedy because you want to save that for when you really need Tom for an important game. So that makes sense, Aaron. And going back to the game with all those snaps, I mean, the Lions, that's the other thing they improved on. Campbell said they improved every week. The 3 and outs, so the defense was well rested when they needed to be, and so they could take care of business late. And so that was a big improvement that I think they punted like twice in that game. And again, they avoided the 3 and outs. So let's transition. What's it going to take for the Lions to be successful to win the game in Arizona? James, let's start with you. What do you think the Lions need to do to win the game?
Well, they need to limit how much Kyler Murray runs the ball. And if he does run the ball, they're going to have to make him pay for it. He's not a big quarterback, so they need to take that away from the game or limit it in some fashion. If he runs for 79 yards like he did against the Rams, that is not good for Detroit. We saw Baker Mayfield, what he was able to do, and he didn't run hardly nearly as much as Kyler Murray will. So that's what I think they have to do. The Lions have historically struggled in Arizona, but this is also not the same historical Lions team. And so I think that they can totally win this game. And Jared Goff has not lost to Arizona since he was a rookie.
Well, let's keep that streak going for Jared Goff then. Coach, how about you? What is it going to take for the Lions to win this game?
Well, thinking about they're playing out in Arizona, maybe Dan Campbell had them turn up the heat in Ford Field last weekend so they'd be ready. So I think we're going to be in better shape. That's for sure. Not off of the Murray thing about the running concept. That worries me. The one is when he is running around in the backfield with the ball still in his hand and making plays downfield. These big, huge splash plays. So the running, limit that as much as possible. But keeping him in the pocket and not allowing him to, his boot pass, which he had the big throw for a TD with, and the ones where he's scrambling and makes 3, 4, 5 guys miss. Because once that happens, your defensive backfield is in bad shape. There's just no way you can stay with the receiver that long. And so I think those are the things. So again, both of those, what James said, what I'm saying is the same concept. If we can keep him in the pocket and limit, he's going to get some, but when he gets those sums, they can't be huge splash plays. And then of course, our defensive backfield in the back, double coverage and stuff like that over top, if that does happen, so that he has to turn into a running quarterback instead of a scrambling, throwing quarterback. And I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think keep the run game in check, which I think a lot of us have a lot of confidence the Lions can do, even though we all highly respect James Conner. We do think the Lions running game defense should be able to keep that in check. But the big thing, the big X factor is Kyler Murray scrambling and finding somebody open on a breakdown or broken play. That is going to be the big thing. I would also say, hey, Arizona scored 28 points in their first game and 41 in the second. We got to keep them under that. You know, we could win a game with them scoring 28, but then that's going to go over the 51 number that James doesn't believe they're going to get to. So if that's not going to happen, we need to have Arizona score fewer points. Couple quick pieces of news. The Lions brought in kicker Greg Joseph. They've already said goodbye to him before we really got to have an ice cream cone with him and get to know him. The New York Giants picked him up off our practice squad because they needed a kicker pretty bad. And the Detroit Lions added Matthew McCrane, kicker, 2018 out of Kansas State. He's been with about a half a dozen or so NFL teams. He was with the DC Defenders UFL team last year. So I guess Jake Bates is going to get to know Matthew McCrane, and hopefully they'll be kicking buddies for a little bit when they're practicing. So that was the roster move. The AFC Defensive Player of the Week, Max Crosby. The NFC Defensive Player of the Week, not Aiden Hutchinson. No, it went to Jesse Bates. And, he has some great numbers in his own right. 12 tackles, 7 were solo, 1 for a loss. He had 2 QB hits, and he had that big interception to help win the game. I think we all kind of talked about the reason he probably got it over Hutchinson's 4.5 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss. It's like, well, the Lions didn't win the game. Is that kind of what you chalk it up to, Coach?
Oh, for sure. I think it is. I mean, you have to look at who had the most impact, and he had the impact because then he sealed the deal, and they won a football game on it. Where and again, I just love when the Lions don't get awards because not that they care about them, but it's still in the back of their mind, like, okay, I'm going to go get 5 this week. That'd be a tall tale. But anyway, so I think that's what it is. So,
hey, did you guys see who the NFC Special Teams Player of the Week was this week?
Who was it?
Austin Seibert. Didn't he make like 7 field goals or something?
Yeah, that's all the offense they generated was 7 field goals. The Giants were the first team in NFL history to score 3 touchdowns and not give up a touchdown and lose in regulation.
And they may be the first to lose to a former Detroit Lions kicker. I mean, obviously Arizona's got Matt Prater, so we get to see that guy again. We appreciate Prater. We like Prater. We root for him every week, but this week.
He's one of several former Lions that are on the Cardinals. You've got our friend Evan Brown is starting at left guard for them. And then you've also got Julian Okwara as a backup linebacker for them. So, which is interesting. They kept him over Trevor Nowaski, who the Lions immediately scooped up on waivers. And then you've got Matt Prater. One interesting thing that the Cardinals did this week is they brought in Zonovan Knight for a tryout.
Yeah.
Interesting if they're trying to get the playoff or the playbook from him.
Yeah.
For sure. And they still have Starling Thomas, who they grabbed from us last year, and he's actually turned into a starter, I believe, for them. And, Campbell's even talked about how that guy has continued to grow, and that's a guy the Lions might have been hoping to keep on the practice squad last year. Okay, guys, it's that time of the show. Before we get out of here, we need to set up prediction time. Again, we don't necessarily say who's going to win or lose, how many points are scored. We will point out the Lions are 3-point favorites on the road in this contest, even though Arizona won 41-10 this past week. James, let's start with you. Do you have any predictions for this week? Do you want to talk about any of your predictions from last week?
My prediction that James Houston would be more of an impact was a total dud. Only played 3 snaps. So I don't know how much you want to take my word at this, but I think that my hot take on this would be that Jake Bates hits a late long field goal to give the Lions a win in the desert.
That would be a fun take.
Let him take a field goal over 40 yet this season.
How about you, Coach? Any predictions here?
I'm going to predict that we're better in the red zone. We're going to be better in the red zone. I'll guarantee they worked on that. And I'm going to predict the second prediction I'm going to make. We will not have too many people on the field at any part of the game because Dan Campbell has been kicking himself for that all week. So those are my two predictions. Better red zone, not too many players on the field.
All right, I like those. I said the Lions would throw for more last week, and they did. I mean, they threw for more yards. And I said they would run for 165. I think they came up with about 139 yards rushing in last week's game. And part of that is because Goff actually added to that running stat. This week, my big one is I think Sam Laporta is going to get as many targets in this game as he's gotten all season. He's had 8 targets all season long. I think they're going to give him 8 targets in this one. I think they're going to change things up just a little bit, use his size and his frame, and see what he can't do against this Arizona team. So that's the only real big one I have. I would like to see Tim Patrick get involved a little bit more maybe, and I'd like to see some more play action, passing. But I'm just going with one. There's only one thing that I really feel good about, and that's Sam Laporta getting 8 targets. James, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think I'm pretty good. I mean, Jerry's prediction of them being better in the red zone has got to be, I hope, is accurate because it can't be much worse than they were last week.
So you're saying Jerry set the bar a little bit low with that prediction?
Well, it's, I would say it's not a low hanging fruit, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. They got to be better than that, right? I mean, we've seen them last year, what they were on 4th down and in the red zone and how much they converted. I think that Ben Johnson's got to be kicking himself for play calling inside the 20. I mean, to be in there that many times and only coming away with 1 score was ridiculous. So, Lions should be 2-0 going into this game and hopefully 3-0 after this one, after they do punch some in.
Coach, any final thoughts?
Okay, just because I only took the low-hanging fruit and said that we should be better in the red zone, I don't know how many times we'll be in there, but I'll add this one to it. Tim Patrick is going to help with a touchdown catch somewhere inside of that prediction I made. How about that one?
I like that.
I like that.
Yes. All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. Tell your friends and family about the show. Like, comment on socials, subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.